Leading up to tomorrow's contest in South Carolina, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are tied for delegates at 51 apiece. But Clinton has a much wider margin in the total delegate count because of her super delegates. Look at that, up 451 to Bernie Sanders' 19. That's how many have pledged to support her at the Democratic convention in July. Okay, and 19, of course, to Bernie Sanders. It makes Super Tuesday crucial for campaigns looking to rein in delegates and capture the momentum in the race for the nomination. Here to talk about the numbers, CBS News Elections Director Anthony Salvanto. Please explain how you go in, and in terms of election results, you're tied for delegates, 51 to 51. But there's such a widespread with superdelegates.
Well, superdelegates are party leaders. They're elected officials within the Democratic Party. And what they can do is they can back any candidate that they want. They can change their minds at any time, too. So the Democratic Party gives this block, it's about a third of the delegates that are needed to win the nomination. And they're the ones who get to, decide what they want to do, when they want to do it. That group right now is solidly behind Hillary Clinton. Then there's another larger block of delegates that are given out based on the election results. And those go through the states, and each time somebody gets X amount of vote in the state, they're given out a certain proportion of delegates, and those are bound. Those are bound to them as they go forward into the convention. Those are the ones that are at stake when we go into a primary or a caucus.
Why does the party do that? What's the point of having delegates who are not allotted based on election results?
It's a balance. It's a balance between giving people that have been elected in their states and in their regions and in Congress a say in the nomination of the party. And I think the attempt was, and this goes back to the 1970s, so it's been a while. There was a time when the party was really divided over how nominees ought to be picked.
Yeah.
And this was one of the ways that they came up with, which is give some of it to primaries, some of it to voters, but also some of it to the elected officials.
Is there an equivalent on the Republican side?
Not really. No, the superdelegates are really a Democratic, a part of the Democratic Party.
All right, for the Democrats, Georgia and Virginia are going to play a very big role in Super Tuesday. Tell me why.
Well, these states, as we go through the South on Super Tuesday, they profile in terms of demographics in Hillary Clinton's favor. And the single biggest reason for that is that they have a large share of African-American voters. And all the polling has shown so far that African-American voters are very solidly behind Secretary Clinton. And she wins them about 3-1. And in places like, as we head to South Carolina, there'll be a majority of the electorate. In Georgia, there'll be a sizable portion as well. When you get that kind of spread among a sizable part of the voting base, well, it's all you have to do is split the rest of the vote, and you can come out ahead.
What about Texas? Why is so much riding on Texas for the Democratic candidates?
Well, it's big, and it's got a lot of delegates. I think you want to look at Super Tuesday as a kind of whole game across all of these states. You ask yourself, where could Bernie Sanders possibly win or pull out an upset victory? A lot of these southern states, as I said, are going to be a tough hill to climb for him, at least we think at this point. Having said that, he may be able to pull out some delegates by winning in regions, by doing well enough, because, like I just said, these delegates are given out proportionally. They're based on how many votes you get, not whether you win or lose.
And that gives him momentum going into the winter state all contests, some of which he's showing up stronger in the poll numbers post Super Tuesday. Let me talk about Texas for the Republicans now. Ted Cruz, his home state, and right now the polls show that he's leading Donald Trump by roughly 5 points or so. And then Marco Rubio coming in down 7 or 8 points in third place right now. What happens if Ted Cruz can come away with the victory in Texas?
Well, look, primaries, when we pick out certain states, I think a lot of people think of them as tests for a candidate.
Right.
If you win somewhere nobody thought you could win, hey, that's a surprise. What did those voters know that we didn't know before?
Gotcha.
But the opposite is also true if you're in a place that you're, quote unquote, expected to win. So your home state, for example, well, Ted Cruz probably has to defend that. That's where voters are going to know him best. They've elected him to the Senate, obviously. So he's got to defend that territory against, obviously, Donald Trump and Rubio. Or, probably at least the political spin on that would be pretty heavy for him.
And have you seen any polling that shows, especially because 20% of Republican voters in Texas are Latino or Hispanic, and what we know is that immigration has been a big topic of conversation on the campaign trail, but it isn't always the most important event or issue motivating voters at the polls.
It's not always the most important thing, but the interesting thing about the immigration issue is that there are divisions in the party over what should be done about it, but the folks who feel that there should not be amnesty, the folks who are really opposed to illegal immigration and more in favor of a deportation program of some sort, they tell us in the polls, they're the ones who vote on the issue. They're the ones who use it as a litmus test for the candidates and say, if you don't favor that, if you don't agree with me, I won't vote for you. And so with that, it has an added power in the primary voting, because the folks who feel that there could be, say, a work program or a path to citizenship, they don't necessarily vote on that issue.
We went from 17 Republican candidates, we're down now to 5. Some of those candidates who have dropped out had actually won delegates. What happens to those delegates now?
Well, for the most part, the delegates that they've won, and there aren't really very many of them, those are bound, and they could be released. What we've seen in the past is that as we head towards the convention, the party tries to unify, and candidates will release their delegates and try to go forward with something unanimous. Now, I'm not sure that that happens, and that happens this year. We'll have to wait and see. But what will happen is that if you were to have, say, any kind of a contest going into the convention, then obviously every delegate matters. But we're a long, long way from that.
We are also watching early voting taking place. In fact, people in Tennessee have been voting since February 10th. Why are they allowed to do that, and how does that influence what happens on primary days or caucus days in those states?
Well, early voting is a huge, huge phenomenon now. And in fact, in the last 10 years, it's really grown by leaps and bounds. In fact, at least a third of all ballots that are cast this year, including in the general, will likely be cast earlier, absentee. It's convenient. It gives people more time. You don't have to wedge yourself into one part of a day's schedule.
Right.
Okay, so people have adopted it, and a lot of these states make it easier and easier now. You don't need an excuse to vote absentee. They set up polling places well in advance of Election Day. So what that means politically is that campaign votes now are locked in. Okay, so you could say, we could watch, say, the debate last night and go, oh, this could change things. Boy, so-and-so had a good debate, a bad debate. But remember that maybe a third of the vote, maybe 20, 30% of the vote is already in the bank because they've cast their ballots absentee. So what it does is it effectively extends Election Day,
right,
and it extends the kinds of things that can sway a voter at any given point in the campaign.
And then it prohibits those last-minute mind changes that might happen the day before or the morning of, when you see an interview that suddenly captures your interest. Or
yeah, maybe. Yeah. But then again, if you're that kind of voter who says, no, I want to take in everything before I cast my vote, then you're probably not voting absentee in the first place.
Anthony, nice to see you. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Tessa.